But yeah, just to give you a bit of a background, well, I work as a researcher in Tampere University, and together with Laura, we have studied and developed the concept of conciliatory journalism, where we ask what is the relationship between journalism and polarization, and how can journalists do their job better with topics that are prone to polarize public debate. And we have noticed similarities or found similarities with peace journalism. How can journalism and journalists support communities that have faced extreme polarization up until the point of violence, such as civil war or terrorism? And now, of course, Johan Galtung, who's considered the founder of, who is the founder of Peace Research Institute Oslo, passed away about a month ago on 17th February. So in that sense, I guess it's appropriate to honor his memory with our lunch talk today. So we'll be talking about peace journalism and the relationship between journalism and peace building efforts. And it's stated in our introductory text that what kind of roles can journalists and journalism take in post-conflict societies? What kind of relations with local communities and authorities are possible and fruitful? And what kind of risks are there? And to kind of the experts to lead us into these questions are Wali Hashi, who has worked as journalist for about 25 years, both in Finland and abroad. He's an experienced media content producer and a trainer of journalists who has published programs on Finnish public broadcasting company Wali and produced documentary series for the Nordic TV channels. And Wali also works as a specialist for the Finnish Foundation for Media and Development, where his responsibilities include the development program and advocacy work in Somalia. So Wali will tell us about this grassroots level peace journalism work in a minute. And our second guest is Allan Leonard, co-founder and managing editor of Shared Future News, which is an online publication dedicated to providing news, information, and personal stories on peace building in Northern Ireland and beyond. So we have about an hour and a lot of interesting stuff to discuss. So let's get started. We'll first listen to both of our guest speakers and then move on to dialogue and joint discussion. And as I warned you, we'll be putting on recording from now on, like this. So here, Wali, you're welcome to begin.
Thank you very much, Mikko, and great. Thanks for the nice introduction and so on. I don't need to say anything about me. Mikko's saying, but I go straight to the point. Yes, definitely. That's the question that we have been asking 2022. At the end of 2022 in Mogadishu, we have asked people to come there, civil society, government, Somalian people, and international community, international organizations, Finnish embassy. And then there's one question that we were asking: can journalists build peace? And we had this roundtable discussion in two days in Mogadishu. So from that on, then we start peace journalism in Finnish Foundation Media Development. So I just want to give you a little bit background about where we are talking about. Somalia, that has civil war for almost 33 years, and they try to build the government system in the country, and that question that we have been asking in 2022, we realized that actually in Somalia, that's the place that they definitely we should start this peace journalism. And that's the question that I would like to ask you after our session, after my introduction, that it should be nice to go through. Can journalists build peace? Is it our job to evolve, or are we peace activists or journalists? That's the question actually that we would like to ask ourselves. And we already find ourselves some answers, but it could be nice to have to test you also to see that where we go from there. When we're talking about Somalia, the people of Somalia have long been a population of divided by the clan leaders, politician leaders, religious leaders, and communication in Somalia has traditionally been a tool for a political influence. People call us oral society, and oral society means that kind of people that you need to influence through mass media. In this case, traditionally, it was songs and poetries and so on, and it was a big part of that country's civil war. And media, so-called media, it was only one radio, if I remember, Radio Mogadishu in 1970s, 80s, in that country that the government has used a propaganda tool, but then clans and different, they use these poetries and songs and so on, and that create a lot of misunderstanding and the problem created. So so that was a long time ago. In the past decades, media has become a threat to the peace as well. I mean, media cannot, sometimes it can be threat to the stability due to the development of technology and social media. And now Somalian rule is definitely, political actress has discovered how war can also be waged online in the digital media, and use this propaganda tools, hate speech, disinformation, and so on. And it's very, very problem. We have realized in East Africa, especially Somalia, that disinformation and hate speech is the biggest problems that they are facing right now, and and even to the point that inciting sections of population to take arms against each other, and just through the social media. However, we realized that through our work for Finnish Foundation Media Development in the country, that the digitalization and social media, traditional media, can also be used a peace building reconciliation with a well blended concept, and that what we realize is that we are talking about, for example, Somalia, that 75% is under 35 years old. It's a very young population. It's the cheapest internet in Africa, and it just has been in civil war for that long time. So this combining, you can imagine, every household in Somalia has some kind of some way or another access to mass media, radio, satellite, TV, social media, and having this access, and we realize that it's very important to heal the mistrust and controversies and triggered by the clan leaders, and have given a public platform that people can debate and peace reconciliation and try to talk about the bad habits, and ask just one question also, that what this civil war, what has created this civil war at the first place. And next video, I will talk about more about this issue. But we now 1 year doing this peace journalism, and before that also, I mean, we have been training for almost 1,000 journalists in all over the country in the last 10 years as Finnish Foundation Media Development, and we realized that how effective media can be, especially if you use in right way, but also how effective it can be if you use for the creation of hate speech and war and this kind of things. And these days is very, very easy. So our message through the public debates, for example, is to encourage people to listen to everyone, such as politicians, clan leaders, religious leaders, so-called minority clans, young people, women, people with the disabilities, and all this combining. What we realize is that to hear their voice, we can see that to just give them chance to bring their ideas at the grassroots level. And that was the reason why we started this peace journalism. So let's jump together. Let's discuss about, is it effective, and how journalists can be a peace builder. But if you show the video, and then let's watch the video, and then after that, let's continue from my side. If you have some questions, I would love to have discussion with you about this issue, because I'm not the expert of this. I'm just journalist, but just through my experience and my background, I realized that definitely peace journalism can be in Somalia context can be very important.
Yes, great. So I will share the screen now, and hopefully everyone can hear the sound as well, loud and clear. So here goes.
About last 35 years, we had a civil war in Somalia. The international community has been trying to have some kind of negotiation between the politicians, clan leaders, religious leaders, and so on and so on. And all those conferences has failed. I think you need to go deeper. You need to go to the grassroots level and understand the culture and the system and what has created this civil war at the first place. Only political agreement cannot solve this kind of complicated problems. We try to take another approach. We want to go to the grassroots level. And our message is very simple. Somalia is a very, very young society. 75% of the society is youth, young people. So we are trying to concentrate on them. So our approach was simple. We go to the schools, we teach them and train them and explain to them peace building. What kind of forgiveness we're talking about, what kind of dialogue we're talking about, what's the religion element in the country, and how we deal with the women, with the minorities, with the disabilities, and what kind of attitude we have in the country. We have 8 students from 4 different schools, and then we have 4 journalists from 4 media outlets. Young journalists will cover the story of the peace ambassadors at the schools. If there is a problem at the school, these young people will try to solve it. But the idea is to teach them, to encourage them to be the future peace builders.
marka shaqa ina sugayso ilaahay inay fuudeeyo nabadoonnadu wax sahlan ma aha waayo waxaan ka rabnaa inaad calaamad su'aal gelisaan oo aad weydiisaan dadka waaweyn odayaasha ay hadda hogaamiyo inta wax noo sheegay halkaas anaguna ugu xareysana.
So what we're trying to do is to train journalists to use that powerful tool and create a positive atmosphere in East African society. There's a lot of positive things in those countries. So if those journalists concentrate on peace building, forgiveness, they can really do a lot of things. And we realized that in Somalia, last 4 years with forgiveness campaign, media can create a positive atmosphere where the peace can be built. And that's what we need to do in all East African countries. We are not going to do it, but we just teach them to do it. Just show them, well, that's what we did. You should do it as well. I think that can build very good bridges between the society in East African countries. So what we have done in Somalia for the last 4 years, we want to also do it in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Uganda, all those places.
All right, thanks, Wali. So did you kind of want to give people the opportunity for a quick questions also in this before we go to the next speaker and then shared dialogue?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you have some quick questions, we can then continue together with Wali and Allan. But if you want particularly to address Wali here, you can do that now. Yes, Petra, please.
Very, very interesting to watch this. But could you just clarify the connection between what you do in the schools with directly with the children and the training of the newsrooms and the journalists.
Yeah, that was the whole idea. I mean, journalists is definitely the connection is that every Somali people these days have some story. They have story to tell. So when the school choose their peace ambassadors, that means these peace ambassadors will make them people to know that they go to different seminars, they will go to TV debates, and the media will cover this particular peace ambassador's story. Who are they? And that then we will use the social media and TV. So what we'll try to make, we try to how you say it? We try to make people. So if we try to make the people to understand, there is a young girl called Aisha who become a peace ambassador that schools, and her story is this, and she will become kind of famous, and then she will be self-finished. So we try to build through media those people, to bring stories from those people, and then through that, it's a young people why we choose, because we get tired with the old clan leaders and religious leaders and so on. So grassroots level means that these people will have this self-confidence that they try to build a peace in the country, and we will do the whole country, not only one place, from one place to another.
Is there also a program running in the schools that takes place when you are not there, or is it like you go in and do and talk to the classes and then you go out, or do the teachers also support this to keep it alive, sort of?
Great question. Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely. It's not that we go there and train and we go. It's that the school will have actually have agreement that these peace ambassadors will continue and they will do it. And when we go there, these journalists, local journalists that we train also, will cover their stories. It will not just be we just go there one time and then the rest they will do themselves. And then we have this day called Forgiveness Day once a year. So every school that we have been, this person's work is to organize in the school also through that day, Forgiveness Day at the schools, because it's a peace ambassador of the schools. If for example, president or the governor of the city want to have this seminar where we talk about peacebuilding, then the school will send this person to that, so they can have a chance to bring their ideas at the schools. So it's not something that it's finished when I left.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Then hands from Joy and Laura. Let's hear your questions and then move on to Allan, and you can we can come back to Wali later. But Joy, please.
Okay. Thanks, Wali, for such an inspirational talk, and especially just sort of illuminating a region that has sort of been neglected, especially in this very important conversation on peace journalism and alternative ways of seeing Somalia and its potentialities. And I'm speaking as a Kenyan, also having experienced this as well. And I'm particularly impressed by the grassroots approach, because sometimes the peace journalisms, the constructive journalisms, conceptualized from a Western perspective. So it's nice to see how a local context is appropriating this and actualizing it. My question was about the media or the journalists themselves and how they're receiving this. And in Kenya, for example, there have been similar efforts to mainstream peace journalism, and the trainers come in and they train and everyone is excited. And then sooner than later, the media tends to go back to their old ways and in terms of negativity. So I'm just curious to know how the journalists themselves and the media is sort of receiving this. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, great question again. Yes, definitely. the media in Somalia, as I told you, Finnish Foundation Media Development, we have been training for the last 10 years. And through that work, we have a big network in Somalia, in media houses and journalists. And that was actually easier for us to make them understand that every time when we have a peace initiative programs, they should be involved. And actually the journalists themselves start this forgiveness campaign through the media. It's not something that the government start or the clan leaders start. It's the journalists who did themselves. But then when we're talking about as a journalist, you know, I always say in the training when we are in Finland, it's not interesting to talk about peace because Finland is already a peace country. I mean, as a journalist. But in Somalia, we have a civil war for that long time, and the people used to see only the war and famine and, you know, piracy and terrorism, and this is a phenomenon in Somalia. So when somebody talk about peace building, it's something new, something very interesting, and also as a journalist, you can be the angle of interest inside through the peace journalism, and we didn't have any problems to bring our ideas of peace journalism in Somali media. It was very easy, and the journalists themselves that we train have done that. So, and I understand what you're talking about, definitely. I mean, you know, journalism is always I mean, we tell it's inform and entertain and so many, and educate, all these three elements involved. So, yeah, we did have a nice way to show I sent Mikko a few videos also. So if you could put this in the chat, that could be also nice to see. You check those videos, and it was easier for us to show that from TV channels.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Then Laura, before we move on to Allan.
Yes, my question was actually, to start with, of course, thank you for illuminating us with your perspective from Somalia and the connections with Finland. This is fascinating. But I had a very, very practical question, like, how old are these students that you involve, or these school grades that you find these ambassadors from? Do you talk to very young children, or are they students of, you know, already in their teens or even older, or does it make a difference how old they are?
Yeah, it makes difference. It's teens. It's a primary school students.
Yes.
And we don't choose. We go there, but the teachers and the school people will choose those young people themselves.
Yes.
And they know their schools. For example, the one who really like to talk, they know the one that can. We have very, very good people. For example, one was meeting with the Somalian president to talk about peace. Was it, I think, last June? So it's a and now we have in Finland, not in Finland, in Somalia, we have Somali national TV, this children program, where we concentrating on peace, because peace is so many different angles you can debate.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And now Wali posed the question that can journalists build peace? And I guess we've seen from one angle that yes, it's possible, but now let's hear what Allan has to contribute to this and tell us your point of view to peace building and journalism.
Thanks very, very, very much, Mikko. And I have my own kind of thoughts on a couple of the questions that were asked, but I'll maybe address those at the end. Very, very good questions. So Mikko gave me a kind introduction about Shared Future News. It was established at about 2008 on the back of civil society wanting to ensure that the commitment in our peace accord of 1998, known as the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, to improve community relations in Northern Ireland was maintained. There was a concern that the commitment by the local government in Northern Ireland was slipping. So, an organization was set up, and we started to report on peace building efforts in Northern Ireland. But I'd like to give kind of, I don't know, I'm not assuming anyone's knowledge about the conflict in Northern Ireland or the Northern Ireland Troubles. But I want to give just approach this from a journalistic point of view as best I can, although I myself am not schooled in journalism. I did not go to journalism school. I just acquired some of the skills over the years. So during the Troubles, journalism in Northern Ireland was, I'll call it traditional, in the sense that it was an active conflict, and the role of journalists, to report on conflict and the protagonist in the conflict and the efforts towards a resolution. Now, many of these journalists they're now retired, and they themselves are dealing with the legacy of all the trauma that they experienced firsthand. And there are some excellent books, edited books, easily read. They're written by the journalists themselves. There's actually 2 volumes of them out now, and I can provide some details in the links. But I just want to start with that perspective of actually the active conflict and the role of the journalist in that conflict. Now, what's interesting, where things start to change, is during the talks that led to the Good Friday Agreement, the multi-party talks that ran essentially from 1994 to 1998. And during that time, the media, now I keep saying traditional journalists, because they were just traditionally trained, on the kind of passive, let's tell the world what the problems are. So no efforts to look at solutions. But during the negotiations that led to the peace accord, they were reporting up, it was a story of international interest, who was speaking to whom, what was being discussed, what were some of the setbacks, etc. Now, a changed moment was after the agreement was made. So the agreement was in April 1998, and then it would be put to a referendum to the people of Northern Ireland. What is the role of journalists in reporting on the campaign for a peace accord? Is it to just, to encourage people to vote yes for it? Is it to try to cover both the for and against campaigns equally? So in Northern Ireland, and I told you about the journalist who covered the conflict at the time, they were asked, I've asked them these questions, what was your view during that campaign? And why did your newspaper and other newspapers here actually endorse a yes vote in Northern Ireland? And most of them said, we were just sick and tired of covering, and being traumatized for 30 years of violence. We journalists we ourselves wanted to see an end to it. Now, these are Northern Ireland-based journalists, wanted to see an end to it. Now, there are a couple that had buyer's remorse. They said, yes, at the time, we encouraged our readers to vote yes, but now I'm just wondering, the agreement didn't turn out as good as it was promised, so maybe we should have been a bit more skeptical during the campaign. And then in contrast to Southern Ireland, they also had a referendum campaign, because the referendum was held both in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. And in Southern Ireland, I lived in Dublin at that time. I noticed your sweatshirt there, Miko. But I was at University College Dublin, thank you. And I lived in Southern Ireland at the time. And what was remarkable was there, the journalists and the government and the literature they presented to the citizens of Southern Ireland was equal yes and no. They had a leaflet that was just, here's the reasons why you vote yes, here's the reasons why you vote no. In Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland government said they gave money out to campaigners to vote yes. They gave absolutely no money to anyone voting no, right? So I'm just giving you this kind of like, within a conflict and within a peace accord, the role of journalists in covering that. Now, post-agreement, journalists then for a little while didn't know what to do with themselves, because the hot conflict was over. And they said, well, I guess we'll just have to cover the politicians and hold them to account. So that's what they did. But it was an awkward period because they weren't used to doing that. And then let's get into what we want to talk about is peace journalism. And when peace journalism itself was introduced as a concept to practicing journalists, and that's why, Joy, I really appreciated your question there. When it was introduced to practicing journalists in Northern Ireland, they all hated it. They all just said, absolutely not. We journalists have absolutely no role in peace building in Northern Ireland. And it's a view that's still maintained to this day. So if you go to a journalism school in Northern Ireland or the United Kingdom or in the Republic of Ireland, and you say, you know, is the role of a journalist is to become active in society and to help society in transition to, a new society? And the answer is absolutely not. It is antithetical, right? So peace journalism has a very bad name in Northern Ireland. Slightly ironic because, you know, we're a land of many people trying to work towards a better society. However, it reflects the political society that we have, which is still very much kind of divided between, we say, orange Protestant and green Catholic nationalist, right? But there's a growing, say, center ground of younger people who were born since the 1998 agreement. They're euphemistically named peace babies. They hate the term, but they were born after the peace accord. And they don't share their parents' views on life. You know, what the issues that matter. They're less exercised about whether we should have a united Ireland or not. So now there's a little bit of like, they're a little more open-minded about like, how should we discuss this place? So Shared Future News, like I explained, since 2008, we've been reporting on stories of peace builders. Our approach is more constructive journalism. And the idea of constructive journalism is, it is a form of active journalism, as peace journalism is, but it's to present potentials. So it's not to advocate for any particular solution, but it's to point out that people are doing things on the ground and their voices need to be heard and they have legitimate concerns. Now, the advantage of constructive journalism is that you can apply it across the board. It's less unacceptable to traditionally trained journalists if you're saying, no, we're not telling you to advocate for anything, but we want you to look at this different way, you know, just tweaking your approach to journalism instead of just being the dog catcher and telling everyone what the problems are, is really, well, who's doing what? So instead of ending a story, somebody should really do something about this problem. Well, who is doing anything about this problem? So that's kind of our approach. And in the discussion, we can go into a little bit of compare and contrast. One thing I would like to add that wasn't in the introduction because I didn't give it to Miko is that I'm also a co-founder of Fact Check NI. It's Northern Ireland's first and only dedicated fact-checking service. And there was much of what Wali had said about training the journalists and younger people about critical thinking. So Fact Check NI has been running since 2015. We did training in schools, secondary schools, age students, you know, about 16, 17 years old, but also, and perhaps more importantly, we do training in local communities. So these groups, you know, people in areas in which they're, say, working class, lower income neighborhoods, where they could be more susceptible to mis and disinformation, not telling them how to think, but just giving them tools. Just sort of say, next time you see a tweet about a riot, you know, in the city, maybe just like do a quick reverse check on that image before you join the riot. You know, just make sure it's a legitimate riot before you join it, you know. And then to conclude, the kind of some practical journalism work that I'm doing. So I'm working with Professor Stephen Youngblood. So he has written the book that hopefully some of you are familiar with, you know, Peace Journalism Principles and Practices. And so I've been working with Stephen for several years. He came over to Northern Ireland where he discovered firsthand this antagonism towards peace journalism. But he did find people here who are actually practicing peace journalism, but they just won't say it by name. So that's something else we should remember too. So later this year, there is an exchange of journalists from Northern Ireland to Kosovo. So, and I've been to Kosovo myself a few times. So there'll be 10 journalists from Northern Ireland traveling to Kosovo in July to go to Pristina and Mitrovica and to learn from 10 Kosovo journalists there. And then in September, the exchange, they will come to Northern Ireland, and we will show them, our society and our state of journalism. And the output will be a set of articles that will be kind of written by all the participants and published at Shared Future News. So I just want to conclude on kind of a practical outworking of journalism, and hopefully I've given you a very quick but fair kind of representation of the world of journalism in Northern Ireland today. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan. That was wonderful and really thought-provoking, and it was nice to kind of nice balance between Wali's idea of can journalists be peace builders, and then your recognition that in a certain social context, peace journalism can have a bad name, whereas for instance, Wali's case, I suppose it still has a good name, hopefully. So now we have 20 minutes for discussion. So who wants to go first? I'll throw some links. Wali mentioned the videos. Also, Allan referred to one of the videos. We'll throw some links in the chat so you can have you can look at them afterwards. But all right, I see hands. Laura first, then Petter. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, this was a wonderful reminder of the fact that names matter. And I was wondering, is it actually, Wali, in Somalia, do you refer your projects as peace journalism? Is this the name tag you give to the projects compared to what Allan is not doing in Ireland?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
And this peace journalism also came up with how people react to that. I think that's a very good question, and maybe Somalia will react different to North Ireland, and it become phenomenon through our training journalists in that country. We realized that's the angle that really missing, and when we talk about peace, not only journalism, peace as a whole in Somalia is a very, very important word this time, and it's this kind of that everybody talk about, and it's because of the background of civil war.
Yes. Petter, do you want to take the next question?
Yes.
Yes, please. Thanks, Allan. Very, very interesting, and it makes you really wonder what is the reason for this strong hostility from the journalistic community in Ireland, or in specifically Northern Ireland, considering the really sort of traumatizing experience of war, civil war is there, as it is in Somalia, for instance. What is your interpretation of this hostility? Have they done such bad things, these peace journalists?
I think, Peter, it's down to the training. It's down to the way they were educated in the field of journalism. That journalist, now this is getting under increasing scrutiny in recent years, rightfully so, in my view, about objectivity. And not so much neutrality. I mean, I think journalists themselves accept that they're not completely neutral, but they always claim to be objective, and they're taught, to take a kind of a third-party view and absolutely not to become involved. And they generally denigrate any form of active journalism, whether it's called civic journalism or public journalism, anything that where they could be seen to be compromised by encouraging deliberation. I mean, I just think it's disingenuous because obviously there's a role for journalism to hold power to account, but so in constructive journalism, there's like a compass and a matrix, and it's just one of four. It must be done, but it's just one of four. So, but traditional journalism just concentrates on that at the expense of everything else. So journalists in Northern Ireland are still trained in traditional, kind of methodology, and they're the ones in the industry. So we do. You can go into schools and train and introduce these concepts, but it's particularly challenging because it's a drop in the ocean. If a young person at university is studying to be a professional journalist, they're going to have to play by the rules of the industry. So so I'm not pretending that we're going to be able to train journalists exclusively on constructive journalism, and that they'll be able to convince their editors. But like Wali was suggesting, if you still do this, because then if they do find themselves in a role in a traditional media house like the BBC or ITV or something like that, they have this knowledge that there's another way, that even just presenting potentials, that maybe they can convince their editor in chief, well, why don't we report, if they're reporting on the environment and climate change, well, editor, could I not please interview someone who's just building, a wind farm, and maybe there's some controversy there, because the editor might want controversy, but maybe there's not controversy, maybe it's a cooperative, and maybe the communities come together, and that's newsworthy, because I always want to know what's newsworthy. It's newsworthy that in this, say, divided society, that in a particular area, people came together and they agreed, to take some positive action. So you convince your editor it's newsworthy, but what you're doing from a constructive journalist point of view is you're showing the potential. In peace building, it's a little more complex because many of the civil society organizations are reliant on public funding to do their work. And that whole infrastructure of funding and annual funding versus multi-year funding, and it's a real kind of nightmare here. And so then the civil society organizations themselves are only going to be able to say so much because they're going to self-censor to a degree. Whereas that's part of the mission, remit of Shared Future News, is that we're not reliant on public funding. We're tiny. We're absolutely tiny. I rely on volunteer journalists myself. But like I say, it's to give them a voice. And I forgot to plug that last night, hence my voice is a little hoarse. Last night, we hosted a session at a festival here called What Does a Peace Builder Actually Do? So I had 4 peace builders from Northern Ireland, and on the back of our podcast of Northern Peace Builders, asked them kind of like, what's life like? What do you actually do? What do you think the future should be, etc. So that was a Shared Future News event to give a platform to peace builders. And then, as Wali was saying, this is now on our YouTube channel, and it's disseminated across social media. So, because I knew if I rang ITV and I said, "Oh, would you like to host a session?" they would have absolutely no interest, because they would be looking for the conflict, or they're going to say bad things about the government. I'm thinking, well, they may or may not. Only if they say bad things about the government will we be interested in hosting them. So I'm just giving you that kind of, in a way, to be fair, like we're like in a mature. When I say mature, media environment, that's the status quo is this dog catcher kind of journalism for decades, and to try to change that's going to take a long time.
Can I just quick edit this? When we're talking about peace journalism, it's not about we concentrate on exactly, we have to show how we build peace and so on. For example, last Christmas, December, we did one big debate in Somalia, which the TV debate, and it was 500,000 people watching, and it was very interesting. So it was peace journalism, but it was not a peace. The subject was that who can build peace? Is it the clan leaders or the politicians? Just one question. So, journalistic point of view, you have a question, you have an angle, you have a content. The content it doesn't have to be a piece, but when you do the content, I'm 25 years as a journalist work in this country, and it's human rights, and always I choose those subjects that fits into my journalism. So I think it's not that difficult to combine journalism and peace, even though that people might not realize that you are actually doing that. So just to.
right, thanks. Maybe Matlena, you have a raised hand. Please go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for both of you. It was really encouraging and so interesting to hear two different point of views to peace building and journalism. It just came to my mind that maybe the difference between Somalia and Northern Ireland could be of kind of consensus or a different state of consensus. Maybe in Somalia, peace as a word or as a goal is so widely accepted that it is easier for journalists to say that they're doing peace journalism. And for some reason, I don't know really the situation in Northern Ireland, but maybe it is not in the consensus sphere, as we can remember this Hallin's sphere of consensus and legitimate disagreement. Maybe it's in the legitimate disagreement sphere in your side. And then, because I'm working in a project that is called sustainable journalism, and I think the sustainability is kind of a word that is in the consensus sphere here in Finland. When I say that journalism should be sustainable, nobody has reacted. No, it shouldn't, or no, we shouldn't work for sustainability. Everybody's like nodding their heads, like, yeah, we have to be sustainable, and that is kind of the journalism is not neutral there. It's building something. It's building sustainable future, and it's really active, proactive in this sense. So it's constructive journalism, even solutions journalism by nature. But nobody's saying that no, we cannot do this because we're being objective and neutral and the third party here. So it's about words and concepts and how they are, if they are in the consensus sphere or not.
I do agree with you, Matlena, but to a degree, because you mentioned about sustainable journalism is about building something and no one disagrees with building something, but no, they do disagree with building something. Journalists do disagree with building something in Northern Ireland. They do not see it as their role as contributing towards building peace. That they do not see that as the role. And I'd be confident that I've asked any journalist in Scotland or England or in the South, do you journalists see your role as building a better society? And they're like, no, I see my role as ensuring democracy and freedom of speech and holding power to account. But as far as actually contributing towards better society, we all have our roles to play, and my role as a journalist is to do this. So that's what I mean about the spectrum of passive to active. So traditional journalism is just very passive and representative. I am the journalist. I tell you what's going. I'm going to hold this person to account. I may present some problems, but I'll just present them. I'm not going to give you any solutions. And then constructive journalism more towards to presenting potentials. Solutions journalism would be more towards promoting solutions. And then you get really active about partaking in solutions, and that's what gets really interesting, is this kind of marrying about journalists actually getting active in promoting the things. But that's for me verging very close on advocacy or activism. So there's a spectrum. There's the spectrum, and there's journalists of every stripe in that. And listening to you, a similar discussion was held at the Bonn Institutes are really the house of constructive journalism, and they have an annual summit. They had their first summit last September, and I'll put the link to that. We went and wrote a summary about it, and at that conference, really, this discussion was the exact same discussion, about where are we, where is constructive journalism on the spectrum? Is solutions journalism too much for us? So, but like Laura said, words matter. People can get precious about words and labels, but for me, it's the principles. So if I find evidence, of any degree of constructive journalism, and at the BBC, I applaud it. I mean, they may not see it as constructive journalism, but I smell it and see it and hear it. So that's what's important, is that we're clear on on what the principles, say, of even peace journalism are. And as Professor Youngblood saw himself, he saw evidence of it, you know, and he would train, again, he participated in training students here on peace journalism. And so they knew what the principles were. So wherever they found themselves in life, they might be able to apply it. But yeah, Wali, thanks for the retort there. That's a great way of approaching it, and you've given me some food for thought. Maybe I should have a little more confidence about pitching my stories to media houses about who in Northern Ireland can deliver peace. Thanks.
Thanks. Now there's a raised hand by Mercedes, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentations and also for the opportunity to add my comment. Of course, I agree that sometimes this is a question, I mean, this debate is a question of naming and how we define with words these concepts. But I am not listening to another word which could open a kind of balance, which is the word of reader. What about if we could talk about the kind of empowered reader, like a peace reader? Then we could, in this case, take away the authority of the journalist and give it to the reader. Then it would be more on the side of the reader to decide if they want to be peace readers or if they want to be constructive readers, of course, or solutions or conciliatory or whatever name we want to put in our good intentions, it would up on them. But maybe it could make sense if we could think of empower the reader by making them choose between, do I want to be a peace reader, for example? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. We talk a lot about journalism and journalists, but a lot less about audiences. Do you, Allan and Wali, do you want to say something about the audiences and the kind of reception of your stories, perhaps?
Yes, audience is very, very important. Actually, it's very important, and you know, it's I have a privilege to born in Somalia as a kid, come as a refugee to Finland and become a journalist in Finland. So I've been trying to get used to it. My audience is not necessarily means that we have the same culture or same backgrounds, and you know, I'm a black man from Africa who is a Muslim, and my audience is a white Christian in Finland. So you know, and of course through that you try to think about your story and how actually you can influence your audience, and that's because they are the one who watching you and who pay for you for your work. And it is very fascinating and very fruitful if you use that in the right way. Now, as I was saying before, when we're talking about peace journalism, and if I, for example, say I will do it in Finland, well, it might not be that interesting, and it might be this kind of obstacles that Northern Ireland that Allan was talking about. But in Somalia, it's a different case. So so then you have to use, and then when you do the content is the most important thing here. Now if you wanna, like in the what we just quick did in Somalia is that we did a story from young people. That's his videos here, young guy, and just talk about his story. Somebody cut his hands and he forgive the one who did it. It's just simple story. As a journalist, it's very important, interesting, very, very high quality, personal story. And then this young boy, we show his story in there, and then he become very famous in the country. Now what he do, he travel all over the country, try to talk about his story, because he get this self-confidence that he can influence. And through this journalism, when we did a story about him, it was not like, let's go to do this journalism. It was just talk about this guy. So everything related to each other. And I think the why he become very famous and very likable person, is because of the audience see him something in them to understand what kind of story that this guy has. And just if you watch this Abdurrazzaq story, is the one that I'm talking about. Yeah, it's very, very important. The audience is very, very important to know. But I shouldn't change in Somalia peace journalism because then we were not talking about the right path. Maybe in Finland, maybe in Ireland, it's a different case.
For me, I agree with Wali completely about content. For me and us at Shared Future News, it's more providing a platform across our kind of political spectrum here. So I'm, in a way, would never want Shared Future News to be the place where all the nice people come together and talk about nice things. It needs to be a place where those with very strong identities on either side of the spectrum, but are doing constructive things, like reaching out, trying to facilitate hard conversations, trying to dial down the emotive, appeal to emotions, but instead, just try to present their story, their history, their identity in a positive, constructive way. That's what we're about, and that's the reputation that we want to have. I don't, obviously you prepare your defenses. I never want anyone to sort of say, oh, you just cover the Irish nationalist side more than the British Unionist side, So I have to, so obviously with any publication, you have your own internal guidelines. But to try to be specific to your question about a peace reader, for me, this reminded me of, the desired outcome of our fact check training is we want critical thinkers. We want critical thinkers and we want good listeners. Those two skills, they always need work done. In fact, argue that you learn these skills in school, and then as adults we let them wane, and we need to constantly refresh and remind ourselves, and try to work with others to always improve their critical thinking, but also to be good listeners. Thanks.
Thanks. That was critical thinkers and good listeners. That's a good summary of a peace reader, I suppose, or conciliatory reader. Petra, I noticed that you had your hand up. We are running out of time, as you know, but maybe we could easily keep on going for another hour as usual. But Petra, if you have still some concluding remarks, and then final concluding remarks to Wali and Allan, and then we'll have to wrap up. But Petra first, please.
Just very, very briefly, I'd like to remind on the topic of empowering audiences. That was in the 90s, it was called civic journalism or public journalism, which was very much targeted at building capacity in communities among audiences to themselves solve their problems. So one of the sort of what was said was giving people the kind of information that they need to handle their problems by themselves, which aligns quite closely with the constructive journalism perspective. And these things sort of also, I think, are quite, more easily sort of digestible for the traditional journalist, because that's after all what we do. We try to provide information that make people function well in their role of sort of democratic citizens. So in that sense, that's a mindset that has always worked very well for me, working with these kinds of things. And I'd also like to remind about that BBC a few years ago had this whole worldwide series called Crossing Divides, which worked very actively with storytelling related to local conflicts in various countries and various settings. And this was very, very constructive and very sort of solutions oriented. So one shouldn't forget that even mainstream media sometimes really good things in this direction. That was my only remark.
No, thank you. Just quickly, thank you very much, Peter. You're quite right about the engaging audiences, and in fact, on that spectrum, that's the difference between deliberative and representative journalism. And deliberative democracy versus representative democracy is maybe a whole different lunchtime talk. But deliberative democracy is popular or getting more popular here, because that involves things like citizens' assemblies, in which, just like, you know, you bring juries, you bring a selection of people in, you give them the facts, both sides, they make a recommendation to government. So instead of just having elected representatives all the time, and so that feeds into journalism as well. So I'm glad you brought that up.
All right, thanks. We are 2 minutes past the mark already. Wali, do you want to say something to? Well, I want to say, first of all, before people are escaping the Zoom room, thanks for everyone for participating and for the great questions today. And we'll be back with next topics. We don't have the date settled yet, but we'll email you with the mailing list. But now, Wali, Allan, do you want to say something to conclude?
I just said, is it possible to involve with you in the future to listen? Because this is very, very interesting. I hope I could be participated also to listen about to be with you guys. So thank you very much. Actually, the only thing I should say is that, you know, we are lucky to, as a journalist, I see myself really as we have this privilege of we can pick and choose about our subjects and story, and through that we can influence people, and through that, so it's how we do it and how we choose it, and it's about content. And I really hope that we remember that responsibilities and freedom of expression, it goes hand in hand, and it's very important to understand that. So thank you very much.
And I just want to also express my thanks and gratitude for this. And I'd love to have a rendezvous with all of you. I humbly suggest maybe the Be Future Festival hosted by the Bonn Institute in Bonn on the 3rd of October. So there's a date. I gave the link to the Bonn Institute. There should be some follow-up links in there. But yeah, I'm fascinated by this subject and really enjoyed this conversation and the excellent questions. Thank you.